everybody. Welcome to Medicine and Science on the Pod TV network. My name is Nick Pellavita. I'll be your moderator for today's show. And today we actually have a pretty exciting topic we're going to discuss. And this just came out in the press, and it's interesting. RFK, detached from reality. And so the thing is, there are a lot of people questioning his skills, especially when it comes to medical science. Partly because he has zero background. He's an environmental attorney, in part because he's had a lot of issues himself. So this was one of the big issues that has come up. Now, it wouldn't be a problem if he was just working at a restaurant somewhere, perhaps serving people coffee or donuts, but he's not. He's head of Health and Human Services in the United States of America, which is a major department. He's head of an area which requires a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise, and it doesn't seem like he has any of them, and ability to lead and hire right people. So we're seeing it as looks to be a major problem. So for our solution, we're going to bring in a real medical doctor, a person who is board certified in internal medicine, has a specialty in infectious diseases, a person who is actually qualified in the medical sciences, and you've seen him on the Pod TV network before here in the United States and, of course, around the world. We're going to bring in Dr. Michael Patmos, who's beaming in now from the California area since he gave up the Hawaiian lifestyle. Dr. Patmos, yes, medicine and science, we're going to talk about an extremely important topic that not only concerns the United States, but around the world, and that's RFK, who's now head of Health and Human Services. And last time I checked, the guy has no medical background whatsoever. So we'll bring you in and see what your thoughts are.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Nick. Good morning to the viewers. Thank you for allowing me into your home to speak with you for a few minutes. Yes, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is like I guess he's sort of a gift, manna from heaven for those of us who want to talk about misinformation and bad science, because he's loaded with it. Just to give you a little example of one of the more interesting things that he did just yesterday or day before, he was observed with his grandchildren hiking in a park near Washington, D.C., where they all got into a creek. Now, this is a creek where there are signs posted that say, don't go in here, because there's raw sewage. Apparently in Washington, D.C., they don't have the infrastructure to handle all their sewage. So sometimes they actually pump raw, untreated sewage into this creek, which runs right through the suburbs there of Washington, D.C., through a certain park. And there's signs of this say, don't go in this water. It's contaminated with fecal bacteria and other things that are in raw sewage, like viruses and so forth, and other protozoans and parasites and things. And so despite this, Kennedy jumps in and submerges himself completely in this creek and takes his grandchildren in there with him, which I think is actually a form of child abuse. If you knowingly take your grandchildren into polluted water and they get sick. So, this reflects his deep lack of understanding of biology. See, the problem with Kennedy is he doesn't believe in germs. He doesn't believe in germ theory. He thinks that healthy people don't get infections, only sick people do. And so if you're healthy and you eat right, and then you don't get infections. So that's his very simple-minded, non-scientific, non-biologically plausible point of view. And then, but that's just one example of sort of the insanity, the insane things that Robert F. Kennedy does. We've heard about testimony from his family members that he cut the head off of a whale on the beach, put it on the roof of his car, and drove it home because he wanted to study it. And we know that, and he admitted to finding a bear on the highway on the New York Thruway that was roadkill, and he put it in his trunk of his car, and then he realized he had it in there and he had to catch a plane, so he just dumped it in Central Park. This guy's not right. The elevator doesn't go to the top floor here. But the point I want to make about Kennedy is, that's a very important point, isn't this that he does bizarre things, is that what he says, I found an article this morning of 35 things that Robert Kennedy says that are flat out wrong. And they say, well, he's lying. Well, I don't think he thinks he's lying. I think he is just completely engulfed in misinformation. And this gets back to the issue of misinformation and why misinformation is a deadly weapon. It's one thing for a lay person to be misinformed. It's one thing for, John Q. Public to have misinformation. It's a whole nother thing when the Secretary of Health and Human Services, when everything he knows is incorrect information, is misinformation. His knowledge base is all wrong. And he doesn't realize it because he doesn't have enough education to be able to tell the difference between correct information in biology and science and medicine and incorrect information. So if it's difficult to know the difference between correct and incorrect information, then what does it take to be able to be informed properly? It takes the correct credentials. And here we get at what is a root cause of a lot of our problems going back to COVID and even before COVID. And here's the issue. Anybody can have an opinion on anything they want. And anybody can opine and think about, opine as an expert, say who's going to win the Super Bowl or which quarterback was better than that quarterback. That's fine for the public to have opinions and debate back and forth about things like that. But when it comes to medicine and science, it's deadly. When the public is misinformed, it's deadly. It's even more deadly when the leaders are misinformed. When our leaders are elected officials, the President of the United States, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Director of the FDA, the Director of the NIH, the Director of the CDC, the Surgeon General, when these people are all misinformed, it's a problem. So misinformation is bad at the public level. It's really bad at the elected official or an appointed official level. Why are these people so misinformed? The reason why Kennedy and Bhattacharya and all these other folks are misinformed is because they're relying on unqualified experts. And I've talked about this many times. There are areas where you don't need expertise. No one needs to be an expert to opine about the World Series. No one needs to be an expert to opine about the weather. But you do need to be an expert to opine knowledgeably about medicine and science. And so what we have is we have a whole gaggle of people who are unqualified and underqualified who are now opining as experts, and we let them get away with it. We have not put a stop to false experts with false credentials. In some cases, their credentials are they're not just unqualified, they have blatant false claims on their resumes. I have reviewed the resumes of nearly every anti-vax expert out there. Most of them have fraudulent resumes, things on their resumes that are not true. I say, oh my God, how can that be? Half of the resumes in the country have fraudulent information on. Resume fraud is a really big deal in all industries, including in medicine. And we have people with resume fraud who are in the government now and influencing public policy. They don't have the credentials to know information from misinformation, so they become misinformed. And then they, in turn, are the source of information that people like Robert Kennedy relies upon. If Robert Kennedy is relying upon a doctor who's not trained in infectious diseases and has a made-up resume, he's going to get misinformed. So it's all about where you're getting your information from. Who is your expert? Who is your source? The reality is, only an infectious disease doctor can be an expert on infectious diseases. A cardiologist cannot, by definition, be an expert in infectious diseases. A guy with 1 year of pathology internship cannot, by definition, be an expert in infectious diseases. A guy with no internship, no residency, no fellowship, no license, no board certification cannot, by definition, be an expert in infectious diseases. Only a fellowship-trained and board-certified infectious disease doctor is an expert in infectious diseases. Now, let me tell you about Kennedy's latest appointment. President Trump has nominated a doctor named Casey Means, M-E-A-N-S, Casey Means, to be Surgeon General. And when asked about it, Trump says, well, I got the nomination from Bobby. Bobby told me she was great. I didn't really look into it. So Trump didn't even vet this person. He's just relying on what Bobby Kennedy told him about Dr. Casey Means, who's now the appointed candidate for Surgeon General. What is the Surgeon General? It's America's doctor, supposed to be a wise physician who advises the public on medical matters. Well, who is this Casey Means, and what qualifications does she have to be Surgeon General? Well, she's not even completed her training. She has an MD degree and she started a residency program in ear, nose, and throat surgery, but she didn't complete it because she said it was too stressful. But she didn't complete it when she was only 6 months from graduation. It's a 5-year residency. I have a lot of experience in graduate medical education. No one does a 5-year residency program and quits with 6 months to go because it's too stressful. The stress is in the first year in surgical internship. That's the stressful year. After that, it gets progressively better. So there's something there doesn't pass the sniff test. In any case, because Dr. Means did not finish her training, she is not board eligible. She's not board certified. She does not have a license to practice medicine. She does not practice medicine. She does not see patients. So how can you have a person who's a physician who never completed their training? Unless you do graduate medical education, your training is incomplete. Medical education is the start. An MD is the beginning, not the end of the training program. She never finished her graduate medical education, so she's incompletely trained, just like Dr. Malone and Dr. Bhattacharya, incompletely trained. And not board certified, not board eligible. She has no license to practice medicine. She has no training in infectious diseases, no training in vaccinology, yet she's going to be appointed, hopefully not, but most likely will, be appointed Surgeon General of the United States, America's doctor. Well, how can you be America's doctor if you're not even a licensed doctor? So this is the problem. I think you could take all of this anti-vax stuff and all of this silliness and boil it down to a root cause. The root cause is we are allowing people who are unqualified to stand at the podium and take the microphone and speak as experts. And meanwhile, the real experts are marginalized, ostracized, attacked, and silenced. When it comes to infectious diseases, only a fellowship-trained, board-certified infectious disease doctor can opine as an expert. No one else is qualified. So that's what I think the root cause of the issue is. Now, the last thing I'll say before I turn it over for questions and discussion is this is all part of an attack on the entire discipline of infectious diseases. I was looking yesterday at the research cuts to the NIH. There's been $1 billion of cuts to medical research. And guess what? Nearly 60% of those cuts came in infectious disease research. There's other areas, chronic disease and mental health and some other areas of medicine, but they all get a small percentage of the cuts. Far and away, the largest cuts to medical research in this country, it's not cancer, it's infectious diseases. And we're now seeing where infectious disease doctors are just completely ignored, just completely marginalized and ignored. And people who don't have training in infectious diseases are now leading the country and leading the discussion. And I think this is something I would expect the Infectious Disease Society of America to be talking about. There's an attack here on infectious disease as a specialty. It's a specialty just like cardiology and oncology. I don't see people attacking oncology or attacking cardiology or endocrinology or rheumatology, but they're sure as heck attacking infectious diseases. Infectious diseases as a specialty is under attack. Infectious disease doctors are under attack. And as a result of that, the public is being misinformed and the leadership is misinformed, and it's leading to harm. That's why we have over 1,000 measles cases right now. We're now exporting measles around the world. It's spreading from the United States to Canada, to Mexico. We're now a third world country when it comes to vaccines, spreading disease to other countries. So that's my comments for today. I just want to point out that I am board certified in internal medicine with added qualifications in infection control and hospital epidemiology. I'm not a fellowship trained infectious disease specialist. I'm an infection control doctor. Anyhow, that's it for today. My comments. Let's discuss it.
Yeah, okay.
So I want to talk about how medical professionals can come to believe bullshit based on their personal experience. If you look on Twitter, there are a ton of nurses who are MAGAs, who are vaccine skeptics, who are COVID disbelievers, ivermectin supporters. And it's like, how can a medical professional come to believe crap? And here's the deal. So, more than 98% of Americans have COVID antibodies in their blood. They've had COVID, or they've been vaccinated, or both. This leads to the bullshit that COVID isn't bad anymore. No, COVID is still very bad. It's just that COVID is less bad for you personally if you've been vaxxed or you've had COVID before and you have antibodies. So that leads to bullshit thing one, that, oh, COVID's just a cold now. No, it's not. It still does a ton of damage. It just doesn't. Go ahead.
We're still losing a jumbo jet of people every month to COVID. About 250, 300 people in the United States are dying every month from COVID. That's a jumbo jet of death every single month. It's not gone. It's quite less than what it was. And we do have a certain degree of herd immunity now from exposure and from vaccination, and that's helped. And that's the reason why we're seeing fewer deaths. There was a time where we had thousands of deaths every day. The death rate has come down, but COVID is still there. I still treat patients with COVID. I just treated a patient the other day with COVID who was pretty sick. So I can tell you it's still out there.
But if
Okay, Dr. Patmos, I want to beat up this. This to me is very interesting and somewhat personal issue. Casey Means, who is being nominated for Surgeon General, is, to my understanding, not licensed to practice medicine. Now, I've been a member of the Florida Bar for 40 years, and you can have a JD but not be a member of a bar because you just don't take the exams and don't pass the bar. To become a licensed medical professional, do you have to pass a bar? My question is, or do you have to pass a test? Why is it that she's not licensed to practice? That's the issue I have.
I've seen it mentioned quite a bit on social media, but it's just glossed over. The folks that are pushing her just kind of gloss over that. Trump doesn't even seem to be aware of it or doesn't even care. But you have to stop and think about that. How can you be America's doctor? You're not even a licensed doctor. I mean, that's like, how could you be America's lawyer?
Not to get her license. That's my question. Does she have to fill out a form? Did she just not fill out a form, or did she have to take a test?
She practices woohoo medicine. She practices holistic medicine. She's not prescribing drugs. She's not operating on people. She's doing stuff. Like, if I wanted to practice holistic medicine, I could too, because I could send people to get to the over-the-counter drugs or that naturopathic crap. But she's practicing.
I have a problem with not being licensed. Okay, well, let me tell you what the problem is. Okay, once you get a license, like I'm licensed before the Florida Bar, admitted for the U.S. Tax Court, the 9th Circuit, the 11th Circuit, and the United States Supreme Court. But part of the reason why it's important is then you have ethical standards and, frankly, a group you have to respond to. In my case, it's the Florida Bar and all these courts that go up the food chain, but predominantly the Bar Association. If you're not licensed to practice medicine, okay, then what I'm saying is she has no oversight whatsoever, to my knowledge, in terms of her medical opinions, if she has any, or whether or not she's even qualified to give a medical opinion. Because if you got a JD degree, and a lot of people do, I have friends, they say, I just don't intend practicing, I just want to get the degree. But guess what? They can't represent anybody in court, okay? And they can't hang themselves out to practice law. So my question is, this person not able to see even a client for a medical purpose. Forget all that I'm selling them, what do they call it, these tablets or stuff, but, vitamins. But seriously.
She never finished her residency, so she's not board eligible. She's not board certified. And she doesn't have a license. She's not qualified to get a license. So she can't practice medicine. How can you be America's doctor if you're not a licensed physician?
All right, so here's what she did most recently.
Yeah, let's
Casey Means and her brother co-wrote Good Energy, the surprising connection between metabolism and limitless health. They wrote it, published in 2024. It doesn't have evidence-based practice. That is, it's not based on studies or working with a ton of patients. The book's central claim is that a single mechanism, which the authors call bad energy, is a common form of mitochondrial dysfunction caused by improper lifestyles. So causes depressions, diseases such as depression, anxiety, acne, infertility, insomnia, heart disease, erectile dysfunction, diabetes, Alzheimer's, cancers. She's blaming unhealthy modern lifestyles on too much sugar, too much stress. None of this is research based. None of it is real medicine. And that's how she's been making her money, practicing woo-woo stuff.
Yeah, this
Is her brother a medical doctor? Is the person who co-authored that, is that brother of hers a medical doctor who co-authored
No,
that?
I mean, I don't know for sure. Let's see.
I don't think so.
Like,
No,
no, he's a lobbyist.
he's a lobbyist.
Oh, okay, that's real important. So what you're telling me, Rick, it looks like this. To get my medical opinion, I might as well go down to my local Denny's and ask the guy who just drove in his truck what I should do about my hernia. Seriously, that's how bad this really is. And that's how bad this is in the United States right now.
Yes.
You do not have a medical system. The medical system has all been destroyed.
So, how they came to the attention, I'm just reading Wikipedia here. RFK Jr. became aware of the Means brother siblings after the brother appeared on Tucker Carlson. And they became advisors to RFK when he was running for president.
Yep. It's, you might as well just ask your Uncle Tony, your Aunt Bertha, your cousin Johnny, you might just ask anybody. You don't need, we've reached the point where expertise is irrelevant. Credentials don't matter. Anybody's an expert. And now you get people who are, kind of talking about this all light energy and vibrations. That's the root cause of all disease, who are now going to be the Surgeon General of the United States. It's unfathomable.
Yeah, but also in court, you do have what they call subject matter experts. And I've operated as subject matter experts before in special areas, and that you actually have to lay a foundation to get someone qualified to become a subject matter expert in front of a judge. It appears to me that the people that are running the health system in the United States of America have no possibility to be qualified as a subject matter expert in any court in the United States of America. Would you say that would be correct, Dr.
Absolutely. So this is just like you would put an expert through a voir dire process in a court of law to see if they're qualified. Why isn't the public offered that same protection? Why don't we do voir dire on these people to see if they're actually qualified? Could you put an expert on the stand as an expert witness with no license to practice medicine, incompletely trained, not board certified, not board eligible, and no clinical practice experience as a medical expert? Your opposition, your opposing attorney would move to disqualify that person as an expert. They don't meet the basic qualifications to be an expert in the eyes of the court. Why isn't the public afforded that same protection?
Well, it sounds to me as that the bar has been lowered for people to be a surgeon general. As a matter of fact, Rick could be the Surgeon General of the United States.
The bar hasn't just been lowered.
Be a better Surgeon General because I wouldn't trust any of my knowledge because I don't have any knowledge, and I would
see you have
people who know what they're talking about.
Time out, Rick. Ethics, which are holding you back. So what you need to do is dismiss your ethics and say, I would like to be Surgeon General of the United States, even though I'm totally unqualified and have no background whatsoever. And under our current system, as we sit today, there's nothing that stops you from being Surgeon General of the United States. Because there's no standards. And we've already seen that and saying there's no standards to be head of Health and Human Services. So this is a serious problem, and we want to bring it to our attention, viewers. I'm actually shocked.
Let me tell you, I have a Surgeon General story that many of our viewers may not know. We had a Surgeon General under Bill Clinton named Jocelyn Elders, highly qualified. She lost her job because she made comments saying, hey, teens, maybe instead of having like full-on intercourse with each other, you should look at masturbating instead. And huge scandal, got fired for telling teens to jerk off instead of having sex.
Somehow I think people already knew that, but be that as it may, you're right. There's a real, right now, the bar has been the bar can't go any lower. It's on the ground right now. You know, anybody could step over this bar to be Surgeon General. And, you know, just the fact, I mean, Kennedy is not qualified for the role he has. None of them are qualified.
So here's what she believes, that the real origin of most diseases is eating ultra-processed foods, you know, like Wonder Bread, environmental factors, lack of sunlight, and lack of exercise. And that's not how you treat, you know, our lifespans have nearly doubled in the past century, even though we supposedly live these unhealthy lifestyles. And you need somebody. She's never prescribed a frickin' drug. She's not licensed to just, you know, you want to go to somebody who's going to tell you, yeah, you've got cancer. You need to get out in the sun more.
Yeah, this is an incompletely trained ear, nose, and throat surgeon. You know, sorry. I mean, she might, in her 4.5 years of residency, might have learned something about ear, nose, and throat surgery, but she certainly doesn't understand anything about pathogenesis of disease.
Yeah, so, and she can't. And then see, this is what I see as a bigger problem, because in college football, which I do follow a lot, these students are their CVs. They go through these people with same with the NFL draft. They go through these people with a fine-tuned comb, and they look at every possible metric, you know, in terms of whether or not they should be an offensive lineman, a wide receiver. And it's on social media, Dr. Patmos. It's on media. Maybe it's because I follow college football everywhere and professional football. And so the thing is, it's a huge vetting process.
Shedeur Sanders was supposed to be drafted number 2, I think. And then, all these coaches met with him. They didn't like his attitude. Too cocky. He fell to the 5th round. He went from number 2 to like number 150.
Yes, and the one that went to the University of Miami, where I went to law school, Cam Ward got drafted number 1, but he had a good attitude, et cetera. But if you look at all the blogs that go on in the social media, these people are looked at like through a microscope. And what's their important job? Well, they play football. It's entertainment. Here you have some of the most important jobs in America, which is to maintain the health of America. And they allow any clown to come walking in, who apparently is not even licensed to practice, to head up, you know, the Surgeon General of the United States. And I'm just going like, you cannot, as I say, as John McEnroe would say, you cannot be serious. But that's what's happening in the United States of America right now. So this Casey Means nomination, no way, you know, that this is actually happening. But it looks like
well, she's worse than unqualified in that you took, like I said, you take me, and I know I don't know shit, so I'll look for people who know shit. But she has replaced her medical knowledge base. How many studies do you read in a year, Dr. Patmos?
Oh my God, I can't count. I'm in the literature every day.
Years where you've read more than 1,000 studies. She's replaced that knowledge base where she is now listening to a bunch of people who have like negative knowledge. She probably reads hundreds of woo-woo articles every year with the you know, like for a while, Tucker Carlson was telling men to go outside naked, find a nice sunny place, lie on your back, spread your legs, and tan your taint. Get sunlight on your nether regions. She's listening to people like that.
And what I told my students when I was teaching at Northeastern, I said, the place you go to, at least if you're looking for studies related to my field, it's ssrn.com. And the sad part, these are graduate students. They didn't even know what it was. I was going like, it's the largest depository of academic journals in the world. Like, no kidding. And I was going, how did they make it through 4 years of college and not know ssrn.com? It wasn't just one of them. Empirical evidence, there's almost like 90% of my class never heard of it. So I do want our viewers to know there is a place for academic journals. It's called SSRN.com.
Well,
Largest
that's the thing.
record out
The
there.
amount of medical
But some of them are not peer reviewed. Just let you know.
the amount of medical knowledge is said to double every month now, because just with AI and with everything, like there's so much, there's an avalanche of new stuff to know. And you, Dr. Patmos, you're always talking about Up to Date, which is this service that goes through all the studies and compiles them for doctors, so doctors in each field can know what they're talking about in their fields. And this, Casey means, would she even know what Up to Date is?
She might, but I guarantee you she's not using it. She doesn't have a subscription to it. I guarantee you, because if you're using Up to Date, you're not going to make these kinds of errors that she's making.
And she's not licensed to practice, but we're going off the air because we've landed our time. We want to thank Dr. Patmos, who is board certified in internal medicine, who has a medical degree and is licensed to practice. Unlike
14 states.
in what?
I got 14 licenses.
You're in 15 states?
14.
I want to talk with you about that.
States.
I'm Florida only. But we'll see you next week on Medicine Science on the network. Take care. Bye-bye.